Tariffs, trade barriers, types of tariffs, trade deficit, and trade surplus. What are they? A tariff is a tax imposed by a government on imported or sometimes exported goods and services. It raises the cost of imported goods, making them less competitive compared to domestic products. For example, if a country imposes a 10% tariff on imported product price at a $100, the importer must pay $10 in tax, making the total cost $110. It has different reasons why governments apply tariffs and just impose tariffs on import. Number one is protecting infant industries. Tariffs provide temporary protection until these sectors are strong enough. Number two, national security and strategic interests. Tariffs ensure local production remains viable. Number three, a strategic industrial policy. The goal is to gradually reduce protection as industries mature and become globally competitive. However, in some cases, it doesn't. Number four, preserving job and social stability, especially relevant in politically or socially sensitive industries. It's important to protect jobs and preserving the jobs, and many countries impose tariffs because of social stability. It makes sense to some extent. Number five, correcting unfair trade policies. Tariffs can act as a corrective tool, not just protective ones, and it may work in some cases. Tariffs have been used for centuries as a tool of economic policy in ancient times. They served as a source of state revenue, one of the most important revenues of many governments around the globe. During the 18th and 19th centuries, tariffs protected emerging industries in Europe and the US. And after World War II, the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, GATT, reduced tariffs globally. This trend continued with the World Trade Organization in 1995. Despite liberalization, tariffs remain a key tool in modern trade wars and national policy, reflecting political and economic priorities. So governments may imply some trade barriers on import and export. Trade barriers are government-imposed restrictions that limit or control international trade. They are used to protect domestic industries, regulate the economy, or achieve political goals. Trade barriers can be tariff or non-tariff barriers, and I'm going to explain them in easy words. Tariff barriers are taxes or duties imposed on imported goods. They increase the cost of foreign products, making domestic products more competitive. However, it may also be applied to export too. We have different types that I will explain in next parts of this presentation. And then we have non-tariff barriers or NTBs. These are regulations or policies other than tariffs that restrict imports or exports. And there are some different types of non-tariff barriers, including import quotas, licensing requirements, technical standards, customs procedures, subsidies to domestic producers, and voluntary export restraints. These are some non-tariff barriers. They have non-financial fees. And then what type of tariffs do we have? And what type of tariffs are common between different countries around the globe? We have a few types of tariffs. Number one is ad valorem tariff. It's a percentage-based tax on the value of the imported goods. For example, 10% tariff on a $1,000 product may lead to a $100 import duty. The second type is a specific tariff, a fixed amount charged per unit of imported good. For example, $5 per kilogram of an imported rice may be classified as a specific tariff. Then we have mixed tariff or compound tariff, combines both ad valorem and the specific tariffs. For example, 5% of value plus $3 per unit. This may also happen. Then another type of tariff is called protective tariff, imposed to protect domestic industries by making imports more expensive for the importers and making domestic products more competitive. Its primary goal is not revenue, but it may generate some revenue for governments. And then we have revenue tariff, which is imposed mainly to generate income for the government rather than protecting the industries. It has been in different countries, and it will continue to stay with many countries because tariff and its import duty generated money is an important source of money for the governments. And then we have anti-dumping tariff, applied when a foreign company sells below the cost or market price in the origin country. And it is aimed to neutralize unfair pricing practices. And we had some cases in WTO during last years. Then we have countervailing duty, a tariff to offset subsidies given by governments to their exporters, like export prizes that may be given to some exporters in specific countries. The next one is retaliatory tariff. It is imposed as a response to unfair trade practices or discriminatory tariffs by another country. And this is what we are seeing in international trade now. Next one is preferential tariff, usually a lower or zero tariff applied to imports from specific countries or most favored nations under some trade agreements which are signed by governments. And finally, we have seasonal tariff, which is applied only during specific times of the year, often to protect local harvests. This happens mostly in agriculture industry. Now, another concept that we are hearing these days many times is trade deficit. It's a negative trade balance. A trade deficit occurs when a country imports more than it exports. Especially, it can be with a specific country or with all the countries, meaning it buys more goods and services from other countries than it sells. For example, let's say that country A exports $100 billion worth of goods in a year to country B, but imports $150 billion from that country. Here we have a kind of trade deficit where one country is importing more than what they export to a given country. And this means that that country has a trade deficit. The next concept is trade surplus, positive trade balance. A trade surplus happens when a country exports more than it imports. It sells more to other countries than it buys. However, it can be to a given country too. Now, for an example, let's imagine that country B, which exports $200 billion and imports $160 billion from a specific country. Here, the trade balance, exports minus imports, is $200 billion minus $160 billion equals plus $40 billion. And here, country B has a trade surplus of $40 billion with the other country. And that's just an example. Why is trade deficit and surplus important? A trade deficit might signal strong domestic demand, but can also lead to debt. And a trade surplus may indicate a strong export sector, but could cause trade tensions between countries. Now, the question is, what are some key factors that lead one country to export more to a specific trading partner than it imports from that same partner? There are different reasons. Number one is competitive advantage. The exporting country may produce cheaper, better, or more specialized goods. For example, Germany exports machinery to many countries because of its advanced engineering sector. The second reason after competitive advantage can be demand differences. The importing country needs or wants certain goods, that it doesn't produce efficiently, so they have to import it. For example, a country with limited oil reserves imports petroleum from an oil-rich nation. Number three is trade policies and tariffs. The importing country may have lower tariffs or free trade agreements, encouraging more imports from the exporter. This may also happen. Meanwhile, the exporting country might restrict imports through tariffs, quotas, or regulations. The next reason, which is now happening in some countries, is currency valuation. If the importing country's currency is strong, it can afford to buy more from the exporter. And a weaker currency in the exporting country also makes its goods cheaper and more attractive for other countries. And this is the case in some examples that we are experiencing these days. And the fifth reason is investment and supply chain links. The exporter may have factories or brands established in the importing country. Trade becomes a part of a global supply chain. China exports electronics to the US. And finally, number six, political or strategic relationships may be a reason for exporting less than what we import. Some countries import from others due to diplomatic ties, aid agreements, or geopolitical strategies, and this may happen between different countries. So we cannot say as a general rule that tariffs are good or bad. They have different applications and they may be used by different countries. However, it's better to have a long-term strategy if we want to have some tariffs. It's better to protect some industries that after a while they can compete and we have competitive advantage in them. And we should, of course, consider a lot of factors when it comes to decision making about tariffs between different countries. Please subscribe to our channel and give us a like or comment if you like this content. Thank you so much.